What, and more importantly, who exactly is the deep state? Who are the nefarious characters who were involved in the 2020 fraudulent presidential election? And is there any chance of them being apprehended or prosecuted? Who exactly poses the greatest threat to our national security as Americans? If you would like to have answers to these questions and more, we're going to be hosting veteran Central Intelligence Agency expert and policy analysis expert, Claire Lopez. Claire Lopez began her career as an operations officer and carried out assignments which took her to over 24 nations of the world. She is also a linguist, fluent in Spanish, German, Bulgarian, French, Russian, and is presently studying Farsi for Islamic document surveillance. Claire's specialty is Middle Eastern affairs, counterintelligence, and counterterrorism. Don't miss this opportunity to hear veteran CIA agent Claire Lopez.
No one from the Barack Hussein Obama administration has yet been held to account for any of this. That's our task.
Put your hands together for Claire Lopez as she comes.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Jesse. It's been quite a while since I've been back here. Very glad to be back here in Tulsa and back with you all from City Elders. Didn't know this morning if I was going to make it. Woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time. I live in Northern Virginia near DC. And of course, the first thing I do every morning is check my phone. And there's a notice there from United Airlines. Our entire system is shut down and all the flights are canceled. So, scramble to my computer and go looking for a new, set of reservations so I can still get here. Everybody else was doing the same thing because they'd all been canceled from their flights too. And so I was actually watching flights disappear even as I was on at 5:30 in the morning. And luckily, though, I did find some alternative reservations and made it out here, for which I'm very glad. But wasn't so sure at 5:30 this morning. Anyway, thank you all for the warm welcome. I'm very glad to be back with you. When Jesse mentioned to me that he'd like me to come speak with you all again, I asked him, what do you think would be, of most interest? What would, be good to talk about? And he said, could I talk about the red, black, green axis? Anybody ever hear of that? A few of you know that sort of term, right? Says, yeah, that's a very good idea. That's what we'll do. So I'll be mindful of the time. I realize, I just fixed my watch here. I realize, what the hour is. So what is the red-green or red-black-green axis, and what is its threat to Oklahoma, the U.S., Western civilization? So let's start with the red. Red is communism, Marxism, right? How many of you have ever read this? Can you see what I'm holding up? It's the Communist Manifesto. You see, it's not very thick. It's a paperback. How many have ever read this? A few, anyway. I wish they'd be teaching that in the schools. But in any case, the red stands for for communism and Marxism. We're talking about the long march through the institutions. Antonio Gramsci, actually the phrase comes from Rudy Dutschke in the 60s, but Antonio Gramsci popularized it earlier. And that was the realization that even after the Russian Revolution of 1917, Western civilization, capitalism, free market capitalism, wasn't just going to fall over. And so they determined at that time, that far back, that what they needed to do was to make their way through all of our societal institutions. That means academia. It means all of the religious institutions. It means you know, every other organization and group you can think of to infiltrate and influence over the years. And that is the long march through the institutions that I'm afraid we're seeing bear fruit, you know, today. In the United States, what are the representations of communism and Marxism? I'll name just a few of them. The Communist Party USA. ANSWER. ANSWER is A-N-S-W-E-R. It's an acronym, right? Stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. Yeah, communists. Code Pink, World Workers' Party, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, so many more. Those are just examples. And if you want, I can later on tell you, you've got representations of those groups right here in Oklahoma. Lots of them. There's a place you can look if you want to find a really long list of these groups, and these groups meaning red and green. Back in January of 2024 in Washington, D.C., I live in Northern Virginia, about 30 miles down the Interstate 95 from D.C. There was a demonstration, a protest, a march. They called it March for Gaza. The website is march4gaza.org. And it's still up, because I go back and I look every now and then. It's still there from January of 24. And this was held in downtown D.C. to support Hamas in the wake. I mean, this is just a couple of months after the horrific Shabbat massacre of October the 7th, 2023. And there they are gathering in downtown Washington, D.C. to march for Gaza. Well, at that website, what I was getting at, there's a button, and the button says something like, I think it says endorsers of March for Gaza. Endorsers or supporters, something like that is the button. If you press that button, that will take you to a list of over 350 organizations, the red and the green, that supported that march and essentially supported Hamas, an Islamic jihadi organization. So if you really want the whole list, go ahead and look at marchforgaza.org and you'll find that button there. All right, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, is heavily involved in the U.S., involved in the street rioting, demonstrations, insurgencies that we've seen breaking out all over the country. Chinese Communist Party is up to their eyeballs in that stuff. For example, direct linkages to groups like Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Liberation Road, and yeah, BLM, Black Lives Matter movement, which is really kind of defunct now, but really had its heyday a few years ago. After the three organizers, Marxist women, all three, Alicia Garza, Therese Cullors, and Opal Tometi, after they collected like multi-tens of millions of dollars for the BLM movement, they all went off and bought mansions. And that was kind of the end of BLM. All right. For the Chinese Communist Party, the way they're organized in the United States in particular, elsewhere too, but here, there's an organization, an agency really, called the United Front Work Department. Ever hear of them? United Front Work Department is subordinate to the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. Its responsibility is for propaganda abroad. Well, domestically too in China, but for our purposes abroad, and certainly here in the United States. And it is influence operations, it's propaganda. A lot of that goes by way of social media. It goes by way of TikTok. You ever see anything on TikTok? Hit the delete button, like immediately. And if any of the younger folks in our families have that, they're all addicted to it. I mean, it's like half of America is on TikTok, including our president, Donald Trump, are on TikTok. And that's how the CCP pushes a lot of this influence operation stuff. In May of 2019, I should remind us all, May 2019, the Xinhua News Agency, which is a mouthpiece media outlet of the CCP, declared, quote, a people's war against the United States. And a lot of people thought, well, this is in the context of all of these trade conflicts going on, sanctions and that sort of thing. And they're just saying that, you know, they're going to get back at us over the sanctions and you know, the commerce aspect of that. Well, no. Let me pull out this little book here. We've got another paperback for you. Okay. Anybody ever see this one? It's called Unrestricted Warfare. This is in English. It's a translation. But it was originally published in English in 1999. I'm not sure if it was written that year or perhaps earlier, but it was written by two then colonels in the People's Liberation Army. And in this book, let me pull it back up again, this is the military manual of the Chinese Communist Party. That's what this is. And sort of towards the middle of the book here, they have a list of over 24 areas of operation. And they call it military and non-military. Let me just read you a couple of these areas of operation. Diplomatic warfare, financial warfare, conventional warfare, biochemical warfare, yeah? Psychological warfare, electronic warfare, on and on, guerrilla warfare, on and on. They tell us straight up what they're doing, how they're doing it, and this is their military manual. I don't know if anyone in our current administration or previous ones has ever read that book or even knows it exists. I hope they do, but I don't know. No, they don't talk to me. So that's the red, very briefly to start that off. Okay, what is the black part of the red, black, green axis? It's essentially the Black Lives Matter movement, as I said, though, founded by those three women. But back in about 2013-14, after the Ferguson, Missouri riots. But it's pretty much defunct now. Included still because some of its influence is still around, but the group itself, after they went off and bought themselves all multi-million-dollar mansions, the group itself kind of is no longer functioning the way it did back then, at least. But there are echoes of the 1960s, 70s Black Power movement. Black Panthers ring a bell. They were seeking outright insurrection, guerrilla warfare, to tear apart urban centers of U.S. cities. BLM itself was organized, let's remember, as a front project of the Marxist-Leninist Freedom Road Socialist Organization, funded by, I mean, this is just a partial list, okay? Ford Foundation, George Soros, Open Society Foundation, surprise. Heinz, Ben & Jerry's, Rockefeller Foundation, Tides Foundation, go on for a long time, but our time is limited. All of them donated millions at the time to Black Lives Matter movement. Basically, that was a conduit in America for anarchist, left-wing, anti-Israel agenda, horribly anti-Semitic. In May of 2021, for example, BLM officially declared solidarity with Hamas on their Twitter account. At that time, it was Twitter. The objective has always been to sow chaos and disorder, rioting, attacks against local law enforcement, civilians too, across the country. George Floyd riots of 2020, good example of all of that. All right, let's just move on because I know there's a clock over there and I'm watching the minutes. I am. All right, so let me just read you real quick part of the BLM manifesto. This is what they stood for, and there are echoes of it that continue to this day, even if it's not directly from BLM. All right, quote, "We are committed to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another and especially our children." What's this our children stuff? I mean, my daughter is my daughter, and yours, I'm sure, and sons are too, yours. All right, let's go to the green part of this, red, black, green axis. So the green stands for the Islamic movement in the United States, most prominently, I guess, represented by the Muslim Brotherhood and its myriad front groups. No, the Muslim Brotherhood is not a terrorist organization. It has never, ever in the history of the Muslim Brotherhood committed a single act of terrorism against the United States or Americans. But what it does do is way worse. They commit subversion. But you know what? There is no law in the United States, Title 18, there's no law against subversion. There are laws against sedition, seditious conspiracy, treason, more, but nothing against subversion. So what they're doing is flying under the radar of our legal system and working and depending upon the First Amendment. But they don't do terrorism, so they can't be designated to the foreign terrorist organizations list. They don't do terrorism. But I think that subversion is a far greater threat to our republic than terrorism. We know how to deal with terrorism. We're pretty good at clobbering terrorists. We really are. We do well at that, after they clobber us first. But as far as subversion, we're just not very sophisticated. We're not, I mean, the enemy is running circles around us, way more sophisticated in terms of subversion than we are. And I think we got to work on that. All right, we're looking at these three, the red, the green, the black. You would say, these are very different ideologies. How could they possibly work together? Well, they do, and the reason and the way that they do is because the same objective is common to them all, and that is destroy America's constitutional republic. Afterwards, they'll sort things out among themselves as to who comes out on top. But for right now, they do work together. It really is an axis, and it is to destroy this republic. It is a shared hatred of America, American principles, American people. The intent, again, is to cause chaos, and they do that allied, working together. All right, what motivates these groups and these people that live among us? They're all over America. They're here. Well, those are the red and the green and the black axis who threaten our communities and our republic are motivated by hatred of Western civilization. That means from the Greeks, from the Romans, it means from Judaism, obviously, Christianity. Western civilization was built on those. That's what they hate. They want to destroy it. They oppose Judeo-Christian principles of our foundational documents, individual liberty, government by consent of the governed, law and order itself, the nuclear family, as you just heard, separation of religion and state, even patriotism itself. They'd like to destroy it. Communists and Marxists and the Islamic movement, those actors are threatening our way of life. They seek to instigate chaos, I'll repeat it again, to lead to revolution that they think then will eventually lead to the destruction of the republic. They seek their own replacement. They want to replace all of that we treasure and cherish with their own totalitarian rule, be it of Marxist, communist, Leninism, or Islamic law, Sharia. So what are their capabilities? What are they capable of? What can they do? The capabilities of these malign actors are centered on the use, as I said, of subversion, not terrorism. We know what to do with terrorists. We clobber them. We do not know even how to recognize, much less confront or counter subversion. That's the difference. And we're kind of vulnerable to that. We just don't understand that level of subtlety. And yeah, we can belittle them all we want, but they are subtle, they are sophisticated, and they're running circles around us. We don't recognize it, as I said, and as the existential threat that it is, subversion. Subversion by both the communist and the Marxist elements of the red-green axis and the Islamic movement are represented primarily in the U.S., the green part by the Muslim Brotherhood, as we've mentioned, its front groups. They use infiltration of our educational system, faith-based institutions, information operations that are aimed at our media. They're very good at that. Psychological operations that are geared to take advantage of our good-hearted Judeo-Christian commitment to love thy neighbor, welcome the stranger, share the wealth. Well, no thank you. I'm keeping my wealth for myself. Add to that the well-meaning generosity, add to that well-meaning generosity, and it is well-meaning, our commitment to the First Amendment. First Amendment rights that include freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petitioning the government for redress of grievances. But too often, I think, we give a pass to those whose smooth words and smiles conceal hardcore enmity. We can come back to the mayoral candidate in New York City, whose name is Zohran Mamdani, if you like, in a bit. But, you know, you put on a nice suit, or maybe al-Shara, you know, the head of that jihadi group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham over in Damascus. He's got a nice suit on now, he trimmed his beard, everybody thinks he's handsome, I don't know why, but they do. And bingo, he's not a jihadi anymore. Well, yeah, he is. Leopards don't change their spots, and neither do jihadis. In any case, these are some of the weaknesses, I think, in our society that lead us to misunderstand others' motives sometimes, even when they are malign, existentially malign. All right. Where does this stuff come from? So we need to understand the international communist movement. Let's start with the red. It has moved. It began with Russia and the Russian Revolution of 1917. I would say now that the leadership of the international communist movement, Marxism, is China. It is much more China. If you want to think about it, China is elder brother, Russia is younger brother. We'll see. We'll see which collapses first. Both of them are in demographic death spirals. Russia is moving as fast as it can to destroy itself. Its economy is in the tank. Its military is mauled. But China has a lot of troubles too, especially economic and demographic. You murder your girl babies, born and unborn, for 36 years, yeah, you're going to have a lack of women in your country. It kind of happens that way. All right, the primary threat from the Marxist communist side of things is from the CCP, I think. And again, it's mostly by way of subversion. They have not attacked us yet, in the homeland at least, kinetically, although a lot of that stuff goes on over in the East China Sea and East Asia, and against our allies there, Philippines, South Korea, Japan. But again, I mentioned to you the book, the military manual, the Unrestricted Warfare, and what that means. It means every kind of warfare that we might not even think of as warfare, but they do. And they're deploying all of that effectively against us. For example, if you want to talk about biological warfare, the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, where was that developed? It was developed in the People's Liberation Army military labs of China. That's where it was developed. When I was on the way over here talking with Kathy, we were talking about this, and the fact is that when Mao Zedong took over China back in 1949, he forged an immediate, even before that, alliance with the Soviet Union at the time, Stalin. And at that time, China was poor and weak and did not have much advanced technology of any kind, but the Soviet Union did, and they shared that with China, with Mao, and that includes biological warfare, which they also took over from that leftover unit of Japan that was established up in Manchuria. I don't know if you know about that, but the Japanese had a horrific biological warfare, I don't know, camp, facility in Manchuria during World War II. Mao didn't get rid of it. He took it over and he developed it together with the Soviet Union. They didn't need us for anything. They've been doing gain of function, Soviet Union, Russia, and China for 50, 60 years. They didn't need us to teach them that. They could teach us, probably. In any case, the SARS-CoV-2 was developed in the PLA labs, as I said, and then deliberately, or maybe by accident, don't know for sure, it got out of that BSL-4, Biosafety Level 4 lab in the Wuhan Institute of Virology in the city of Wuhan, sort of in central eastern China, you might say. Don't know for sure how it got out, but they certainly developed it to be a biological weapon. Whether it got out by accident or on purpose, hard to know or to say, but it got out, and we know the result after that. It wasn't us, it wasn't Fauci, it wasn't Francis Collins at NIH, it was the PLA, People's Liberation Army of China, that developed that, and they're doing a whole lot more. Ever hear of anthrax, Ebola, plague, smallpox? They are working on all of those to be biological weapons agents to be used against the world, and in particular against the United States. There was a speech given back in about 2003 by the then defense minister of China. His name was Shi Haoxian. And he gave this speech originally to a private group, I guess the military, or in any case, leadership of the Communist Party in China. But it became public later. It's been published now, in English, the translation. And in that speech, it's chilling, absolutely chilling. 2003, he is talking about how China needs to use biological weapons to, quote unquote, clean up America, and to create in all of North America, not just us, but Canada too, to create, and he uses this word, Lebensraum. You know that word? Lebensraum? It's German. It means living space. Remember how World War II started? Hitler says there are German populations in the Sudetenland, that was the border area of then Czechoslovakia. They should be part of Germany. So he invaded. And the powers of Europe, Britain and France, well, you know, maybe he's got a point. Those are Germans, so maybe he's right. Let him have the Sudetenland. Yeah, then what? Then it was the rest of Czechoslovakia. Then it was Poland. Then it was the whole world. Okay, that's what's going on. That's the word Lebensraum. That's where that comes from. This Chinese Minister of Defense used that term in his speech about biological weapons being used against the United States. All right. I've mentioned the sophisticated use of information operations, especially on social media, by the Chinese Communist Party and the United Front Work Department. In the case of Russia, as I said, younger brother, but still dangerous. Obviously, you know, the invasion of Ukraine shows us that, if nothing else. And they use the Kremlin, the KGB. I still call them the KGB. They use social media in particular to disseminate false information, information operations, psychological operations, and to mislead people about its brutal invasion of Ukraine and other things. And that communist ideology has permeated American academia for decades. You know, it first came over here with the Frankfurt School. Where did the Frankfurt School come from? Well, Frankfurt, Germany, which was the place that Russia first thought would be the next to fall to communism after Russia. And only half of it did for a time, East Germany. But the Frankfurt School, after being kicked out of Germany, came to the United States. You know where they landed? The faculty lounges of, wait for it, Columbia University. That's where they got their first foothold in American academia and spread from there. Not just through, you know, the upper levels of university education, but all the way on down high school and I would say even below that, middle school and beyond. So that communist ideology, you heard Jesse and others here speaking about this, how it has permeated U.S. academia. You got rainbow flags in preschool to hardcore indoctrination at our Ivy League universities. Critical race theory, DEI, you've heard themes spread throughout GovEd, but also it made their way into private and Christian and Jewish schools as well. Now, even with President Trump in the White House and Linda McMahon at the Department of Education, which she knows she's responsible for dissolving and sending those funding and the responsibility back to the states at the local level. Even with all that, it's still quite a monumental job to get it out, to get all that out of our schools. For Beijing, turn to China. The primary vehicles for disseminating communist ideology are, again, United Front Work Department and TikTok, social media. I'm looking at the clock. Okay, let me skip a bunch of stuff here. I will mention also that Chinese have infiltrated our country physically. You might have heard of the Darien Gap, that jungle area that sits between Colombia at the northern part of South America and Panama, the southernmost country of Central America. Well, the Darien Gap is this jungle area that lies between, really rugged, and people coming up, illegals from, let's say, South America. Many perished in there trying to get north. Well, in any case, though, what did come up there through there successfully were reportedly 10 to 15,000 jungle tigers. You know what jungle tigers are? It's a special battalion of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. And the Panamanians, on the Panamanian side of the Darien Gap, they noticed all these young, fit, military-looking young Chinese men coming through there, and reporters, some very good ones like Michael Yan and Todd Bensman, who's now in the administration, thank goodness, at DHS. They were down there doing reporting. And they talked to the villagers on the Panamanian side of the Darien Gap about these Chinese. And nobody knew what was going on, because what they would do, you know, when somebody made it through the Darien Gap and alive, and they come out the other side, they're like, shoo, we made it. I mean, it's a really harsh, area and many people died in there. But what the villagers noticed is that when the Chinese men were coming out of the Darien Gap into their village, they would get chickens. They'd kill the chickens. You finish eating, everybody? Okay. And then they would drink shots of their blood. And we didn't know what that was. Michael Yan didn't know what that was. And so we asked a mutual friend of ours, Li Mengyan, who is a Chinese virologist, epidemiologist, who escaped out of China, out of Hong Kong, really, and taught me just about everything I know about epidemiology and virology. And we asked her, and she said, oh, yeah, that's a special battalion of the People's Liberation Army. Well, they got on buses. Everybody saw the buses. And the buses headed up north. And they crossed our border, probably not at checkpoints, but rather at the great big open spaces left in between the crossing points, the official crossing points, over the last 4 years or so. 10 to 15,000 jungle tigers are in this country right now. Nobody knows where they are or exactly what they're up to. But I've written about it. I have a blog site, by the way, at Newsmax. I appear on Newsmax sometimes too, but at that blog site, I have written about the jungle tigers. If ever you want to go there, go to Newsmax and go to the, I guess it's op-ed pieces at that website, and you'll find my blog site. Okay, in any case, we're at risk, I think serious risk from the Chinese Communist Party and the military in different ways. As we said, the subversion, the psyops, the info-ops, but also, you know, these jungle tigers in the country. Also inside of the United States are things called secret, well, they're formerly secret, police stations of the Chinese government. They're not diplomatic. They have no diplomatic recognition or authority of any kind, but they are located in cities across the United States, not in Oklahoma that I know of, no. But in other states they are, and they primarily, I guess what their purpose is to intimidate and harass Chinese nationals living in the United States, and even sometimes to coerce them to go back home to China to face, more prosecution, persecution, or worse. So we have these police stations. They have been identified in Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and a number of smaller cities, but again, not in Oklahoma that I know of. Okay, let me skip some stuff here. I've given you some ideas of reading, and I can offer you more if you're interested on what to follow up with. Okay, finally, let me finish with this. What must we do to counter all of this, right? I think the most important thing to counter subversion like this, from all of the above, the red, the black, and the green, is awareness, first of all. So that's what you're doing here, right here tonight, awareness and understanding of the threat. And then support for countermeasures by the local community itself, communities around Oklahoma and the U.S., and cooperation with local law enforcement and our elected officials. Learn the enemy threat doctrines, Saul Alinsky, Marx, Lenin, Gramsci, and Islam. I know it's a lot, but little by little, maybe. One last shout out I want to give. I saw the short video there with Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, and it just happens that yesterday I was watching an interview with Governor Stitt and Jan Jekielek on the American Thought Leaders program of Epoch Times. You familiar with that at all? Epoch Times is terrific, and American Thought Leaders is Jan Jekielek's series of interviews that he does with different people. Well, he did one with Governor Kevin Stitt, and it was a terrific interview. And I wanted to give him credit because Governor Stitt, recognized and talked about this in the interview, about how China has been trying to exert influence at the state levels across the U.S. because they're running into kind of a brick wall at the White House executive level, bravo. But so they're trying now to come down to the state levels and find their way in that way. And that is Governor Stitt, understands all this, and he's been rejecting it outright for Oklahoma. So big kudos to him. He's also developed his own strategy to avoid reliance on China-made imports. That's really important. Last year, Governor Stitt issued an executive order to secure Oklahoma against threats posed by foreign adversaries, particularly the CCP. And this executive order mandates the Office of Management and Enterprise Services of Oklahoma to conduct annual statewide risk assessments to identify vulnerabilities, including in the area of cybersecurity, risks to the electric grid, water infrastructure, supply chains, all of this that China arguably threatens, and in particular with these jungle tigers we got in the country. We don't know what they're up to. But it sounds to me like that would be an excellent model, this executive order, for other states too. All right, finally, I'll end with this. We need to understand, first of all, who we are. If you ever knew the scholar Samuel Huntington, deceased now for some years, but he wrote a book by that name, Who Are We? And that book was about Western civilization and how it is unique and how it is in complete antithesis to the red, the black, and the green that we're just talking about. We are defenders of Judeo-Christian-based Western civilization. That's who we are. That's who we're supposed to be. We're the crucible of reason, of freedom, of order. We need to be proud of our Western civilization identity, treasure its principles of individual liberty, equality under the law, government by consent of the governed, protection of minorities, First Amendment liberties. You don't find that First Amendment, set of liberties anywhere else. I just got back. I spent a week last week in Cambridge, England, for the second time, speaking at a conference on Ukraine and Russia, as it was. But you see what's going on in England. They're putting people in jail for posts on social media. And I don't mean threats or pornography. I don't mean that. But I mean just simple expressions of opinion on social. They're going to jail. So we're very lucky here. We lucked out with our founding fathers. In any case, be proud of these American achievements, our culture, and our heroes. And more important than anything else, teach these to our children. Well, thank you very much. Let me stop there and invite your questions if you have any.